Hey guys, this is Eggy from the Math Egghead program, and in this video we are focusing on balancing chemical equations. I did have a video previously on my channel that went into more depth about balancing chemical equations with my partner Jessie from General Chemistry. This video is just going to be a quick synopsis of everything that we can definitely cover the basics of balancing chemical equations. So if you guys want to see more videos on general chemistry, always feel free to leave a comment, subscribe, share the video. I do have a page on Patreon where I have longer videos that go into more depth of each topic, like pre-calculus, pre-algebra, calculus, and chemistry, of course. So let's get started here with something fairly easy. Now, let's say we had a problem here. We had iron plus chlorine with a subscript of 2, and it gave us iron chlorine. Now, as you can see here, there's a subscript, and we don't see any coefficients. Now, just a quick reminder, coefficients usually are the numbers that are on the left side of the element. If you don't see a number next to the element on the left side, we can assume that the coefficient is 1. And remember, quick tip, the subscripts are never changed when you're balancing equation. The only thing that you are changing are the coefficients, okay? So that's a quick reminder, okay? The only thing that is changing is the coefficients. The subscripts are just there to kind of guide you on how many atoms we have, but of the element. But in this case, things look very easy here. So now, I do want to also emphasize between the difference between subscripts and the coefficients. Now, for example, let's say we had iron and then chlorine here, and then we had, again, chlorine here, iron. Do you guys notice the difference? Well, in this particular case, the subscript only affects chlorine because remember, you guys always have to be mindful of the parentheses. Here, the subscript affects the entire chemical reaction, If you see here, you have to pay attention to what exactly is the subscript, where is the parentheses? Now here, the coefficient. If you look here, let's say we had this, and then we had this. Is there a difference here? No, there isn't. The coefficient always affects the entire element, okay? But the subscript usually does not. You have to just be very attentive of where the subscript lies, okay? So let me get rid of this here. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you notice here, when you see the product versus the reaction, right? And then let the arrow guide you of where exactly you're supposed to be splitting the actual equation here. So here we have the product and we have the reactant. Now this is the reactant. Here we have 1 iron and we have 2 chlorine. Here we have 1 iron and we have 3 chlorine. Now some of you might say, why doesn't the 3 affect the iron? Now remember, there isn't a parentheses here. The coefficient is 1, and it would be 3 times 1. 3 times 1, because there isn't a coefficient here, so we assume that it's 1. Let me clear this out for you. Okay, guys. So how would we possibly get from 2 to 3? Now, we see that the iron matches, right? We have one here and we have one here. So this matches. But what about chlorine? How could we get 2 to 3? Now, that's how you should be looking at it. When you're comparing the two subscripts, you're looking to see how can you go from one number to the next, right? If this number, for instance, was 5 and this number, for instance, was 7, you would think to yourself, okay, how would I get 5 to 7? Meaning, what would I have to multiply 5 to get to 7? That's exactly how we're looking at this here. And remember, you're always paying attention to the smaller number and then focusing on how you would get to the bigger number, right? So let's say these were interchangeable. They're not, but let's say in this way we had 3 here and we had 2 here. Then you would think to yourself, okay, how could I get from 2 to 3? Right? And then you would know that this would have to be affected, the coefficient here. Because remember, the coefficient is the only thing that changes when you're balancing equations. Now, let's see here. Okay, so in order for a 2 to go to 3, we would have to multiply it by 1.5. So 1.5 times 2 equals 3. So really, the coefficient here would change to 1.5. So then the new problem would be iron plus chlorine, because 2 times 1.5 is 3. Excuse me. Okay. Now, are we done? No, we're not. Because the coefficients should always be whole numbers. We never want to deal with numbers in decimal form. So if you ever get 1.5, 1.7, usually you will not get anything less or more than 1.5. If you ever do, just know that you need to go to the nearest whole number. So in this case, we would just multiply the entire problem by 2. So the correct equation would be 2 iron to 3 chlorine, and the coefficient here would change. So then we would get 2 irons, 6 chlorine, 2 irons, right? Because the 2 affects the iron, and the 2 also affects the chlorine, right? Let me just write this particular thing on the side, right? Because really what you're saying is you have 2 irons and you have 2 chlorines, right? And then we know that we have a subscript 3 here, so we would have 6. Let me rewrite all of this again. All right, guys. Okay. So then again, remember, we didn't see a coefficient originally, so we always assume that the coefficient is 1. So every coefficient times 2. So it would be 2 iron, 3 chlorine. The subscripts never change. 2 iron and the chlorine and the subscript. And then here you would have 2 iron, 6 chlorine, 2 iron, 6 chlorine. I really do hope that this is helpful for you. Remember, Coefficient are the only things that you're changing. You're never changing the subscript. If you ever do end up with a coefficient that is in decimal form, multiply it by 2 so you can get it to a whole number. Remember, when you're dealing with polyatomic atoms, or you're dealing with more than one atom, remember you have to pay attention to where the parentheses is placed, so that you know exactly where the subscript is going to affect the actual atom or element. Okay, I hope this video was helpful. Feel free to subscribe, like, comment, share. Remember, I have a Patreon page, and I will see you in the next video.